You're listening to audio from Discover Life Church. Discover Life is a place where people can encounter the real God, where they find freedom, discover their purpose, and make a difference. Now is the time to get started. Thank you for joining us.
Ever feel like you're just going through the motions, even when you're trying to, actually grow or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving into today, this whole idea of a hardened heart. But get this, we're talking about people who, on the surface, should be the least likely to have one.
Right.
We're looking at Mark chapter 6, verses 45 to 52. The disciples, with Jesus, these guys saw miracles firsthand.
You'd think they'd be the last ones struggling to, grasp what Jesus was teaching, but
Exactly.
this passage, it kind of hints that maybe things weren't so simple.
Okay, so this sermon we're unpacking today, it points out that even with those front row seats to the miraculous, the disciples were kind of missing something, a deeper lesson.
It's like they were at the concert, but they were too busy checking their phones to actually hear the music.
And that's what makes this deep dive so relevant, I think, to all of us, right?
Absolutely.
Because it reminds us that we can be part of something, positive, transformative even, but still totally miss the point.
Yeah, if our hearts aren't in the right place.
Yeah, if our hearts aren't in the right place.
The speaker we're discussing, he defines a hardened heart not just as being a bad person.
Right.
It's more about becoming what he calls an unteachable learner.
Ooh, I like that. Unteachable learner.
It's that, resistance to change, that inability to really let the lessons sink in, even when you're surrounded by opportunities for growth.
It's like thinking you know everything about something and then realizing you've barely scratched the surface. It makes me think of that saying, beginner's mind.
Oh, yeah.
That openness to learning and even being wrong. Seems like the disciples, even with Jesus right there, they were struggling with that.
It's true. And the sermon, it really digs into the root causes of this whole hardened heart thing. Looks at it through the lens of Mark 6.41, where Jesus blesses the loaves and fishes.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Sure.
How does blessing food, how does that tie into a hardened heart?
It's about where you're putting your focus, you see.
Okay.
Instead of fixating on what you don't have, you shift your attention to the provider, the source of abundance.
Okay.
That simple act of gratitude, that's key, the speaker argues, to softening a hardened heart.
That's interesting. It's like that saying, what you focus on expands, right?
Exactly.
If you're constantly dwelling on what's wrong, you're going to see more negativity.
Yeah.
But if you can find things to be grateful for, even when things are tough,
Right.
it can totally shift your perspective.
And the way the speaker delivers this message, it's so dynamic, especially his use of repetition.
Yes.
It really hammers home this idea of shifting from lack to abundance. It's not about pretending the problems aren't there. It's about being intentional with your energy. Where are you going to put your attention?
So gratitude is like the antidote to a hardened heart.
You could say that, yeah. It's not about ignoring the problems, but about actively choosing to see the blessings, to rely on something bigger than yourself.
It's about being open to receiving more. Trusting that even when things are tough, there's a bigger picture, right?
Precisely. And this is where the speaker connects the disciples' experience to all of us. We humans, we have this tendency to want to control everything.
Right. Tell me about it.
And he says, we weren't meant to. He draws this really stark contrast between being a victim of your circumstances versus being a victor, someone who chooses their response.
Ooh, I like that. Victim versus victor.
Right.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of feeling powerless, especially when things are hard.
Yeah.
But choosing how you respond, even if you can't control the situation itself, that's powerful.
It is empowering, absolutely. And the speaker argues that making that choice, it all starts with gratitude.
So how do we actually make that shift from feeling like a victim to really becoming a victor, especially when it feels like, we're rowing against the wind, like the disciples were in that storm?
Right. Well, the speaker, he points out the subtle but really important detail in the story. He reminds us that even in that miracle with the loaves and fishes, the disciples weren't just watching.
Right.
They were actually part of it. They were invited to participate in the miracle.
That's a good point. It's just because you're present for something amazing, it doesn't mean you're really engaged,
Totally.
It's like, I don't know, going to a concert and spending the whole time scrolling through your phone. Yeah, you're there, but are you really experiencing the music?
Exactly. And that actually ties into the deeper message of this whole sermon.
Okay.
The speaker, he's saying that some people, they get addicted to the miracles themselves rather than seeking like a real connection with the divine, you know?
Yeah.
He even says, and I'm paraphrasing here a bit, but he says, I can have a move of God in my bedroom.
Wow. That's a powerful image. What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think it's about recognizing that true transformation, it happens on the inside.
Right.
It's not just about these big, extraordinary events.
It's about cultivating that inner connection, no matter what's going on around you.
Exactly.
So it's not about chasing after the next miracle, the next spiritual high. It's about something much deeper and more consistent.
Right. And the speaker suggests that this inward focus, this is what's essential to softening a hardened heart. He comes back to Mark 6.41, the part where Jesus blesses the bread and fish.
Right.
And he points out how Jesus looked up to heaven, emphasizing that upward gaze, that shift from focusing on what's lacking to acknowledging the source of abundance.
It's such a small detail in the story, but it speaks volumes.
It does.
Like in that moment, Jesus is modeling the exact shift in perspective that the speaker is talking about.
It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Even when we feel surrounded by limitations.
Yes. And the speaker really emphasizes that the original Greek word for blessed in that passage, it implies giving thanks.
Oh, interesting.
It's about cultivating gratitude even, or maybe especially, when you're facing a challenge.
Wow.
It's about surrender. Surrendering to the situation, to something bigger than yourself, and trusting that good can come from it, even if you can't see how yet.
So are you saying that surrender is like a key part of softening a hardened heart?
I think so, yeah. The speaker really seems to suggest that surrendering control, it's not about giving up. It's about aligning yourself with a different source of power.
Yeah.
When we're so focused on our own limited perspective, on what we don't have, it's so easy to feel stuck, powerless.
Right.
But when we surrender,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to new possibilities, to solution support, things we might not have even imagined.
It's like we're shifting from, rowing against the wind, exhausting ourselves with our own efforts, to just hoisting the sails and letting the wind carry us forward.
Exactly. But letting go of control, that can be scary.
Yeah.
How do we get past that fear?
Well, the speaker, he emphasizes that surrender. It's a process.
Okay.
It's not like a one-time thing. And he actually shares a story about this, something he went through, a major setback in the early days of his church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was denied access to this high school auditorium he'd been counting on using.
Ugh, I bet that was a huge disappointment.
It was. But instead of getting bitter or just giving up, he chose to see it as, a redirection.
Okay.
He surrendered his attachment to that specific plan and just trusted that something better was coming. And you know what?
What happened?
He ended up in a much better situation, one that wouldn't have been possible if he'd clung to his original plan.
That's an amazing example of how surrender, even when it feels like a loss or a setback,
Right.
can actually lead something way better.
Yeah.
It's about trusting that there's something bigger at work, guiding us towards something good, even when we can't see the path.
Exactly. And that trust, the speaker argues, it's essential to overcoming a hardened heart. When we're stuck in resistance,
Yeah.
we close ourselves off to the very things that could help us grow. But when we surrender,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to new possibilities, to a whole universe of abundance that's always there.
So it's about shifting our perspective from this is what I want and this is the only way to get it. I'm open to the possibility that there's a different way, maybe even a better way, and I'm willing to trust how things unfold.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the speaker, he ties this all back to the disciples in the boat, battling the wind and the waves. He suggests that maybe the reason they were so exhausted was because they were trying to control something they were never meant to control.
That's interesting.
What if, instead of freaking out when they saw Jesus walking on water, they'd recognized it as an invitation?
Oh, wow.
An invitation to step out of their fear and into a deeper level of trust. Maybe they could have even joined him on the water.
That's such a powerful image. And it speaks to, the power of surrender to totally transform us. When we let go of needing to control every outcome,
Yes.
we open ourselves up to experiences that, honestly, our minds can barely even grasp.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about this desire for efficiency, right? For finding a better way to navigate all those tough times, those storms that come up in life. But if surrender is the key, where do we even start?
Well, the speaker ends on a pretty powerful note. He reminds us that getting over a hardened heart It's not like a one and done deal. It's something you got to keep choosing, you know? Gratitude, surrender, trust, every moment, every situation.
It's a practice.
Exactly. And he doesn't sugarcoat it either. He says straight up, without gratitude, we're stuck, trapped in that victim mentality.
Right.
But with it, with gratitude, we realize we have a choice.
We have power.
Yes. We have power in how we respond to the stuff life throws at us.
It's a really powerful reminder that we're not just like helpless. We're not at the mercy of our circumstances. We can choose to stay stuck in that negativity and that feeling of lack, or we can choose a different path, a path of gratitude.
Yeah.
And that opens us up to abundance, even when things are hard.
And choosing that path, it's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about looking at things differently, focusing on where your strength comes from, not on how big the storm seems.
He used this phrase that really stuck with me. The evidence of his goodness is all around us. It's so easy to just get caught up in what's going wrong, to only see the negative.
Right.
But what if we made an effort to look for the good? To see those little glimmers of hope, of grace, even in the middle of the chaos?
It changes everything.
What if instead of making a list of everything we wish were different, we spend some time appreciating the good that's already here?
I think that's where the real change starts, and not in some big mystical experience. But those quiet moments, you know? When you stop and think, when you practice being grateful, when you make that choice to shift your focus.
From lack to abundance.
From victim to victor.
Recognizing those everyday miracles, the stuff we usually just take for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave you with this. Think about the storms in your own life. What might change if you looked at them a little differently?
What if you shifted from lack to gratitude? From trying to control everything to just surrendering?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a thought-provoking one, for sure.
It really has. Until next time.